Hello guys, welcome back to another video where we're gonna explain a very important topic in A-level biology, which is relevant whenever we talk about anything that involves energy, like photosynthesis or respiration. We're gonna talk about these terms a lot during these two processes, and these processes are very high yield. A lot of questions come from the processes of photosynthesis and respiration. So we have to know what these things are, what these things ATP, ADP, NADP, NAD, reduced NADP. So these are terms that we're going to be using a lot in photosynthesis and respiration. So what is ATP exactly? There's a lot of misconceptions about ATP, that it is a source of energy or it's in itself energy. So it is another way to say energy. And this is not true. This is not true at all. ATP is a biological molecule, just like a protein, a nucleic acid, DNA. ATP is also its own molecule. And this ATP, this is the structure of ATP, and it may remind you of a very important structure in the body that has almost the same components and the same structure, and this is DNA. So DNA usually has a deoxyribose sugar, a sugar group, and a nitrogenous base, which can be adenine or guanine or cytosine or thymine, and it has a phosphate group. So the difference between ATP and a nucleotide of DNA is that ATP has 3 phosphate groups. So it has a sugar molecule, adenine, a nitrogenous base, and 3 phosphate molecules. This is ATP. So what does it stand for? Why is it called ATP? Of course, it is an acronym, and it stands for adenosine triphosphate. So adenosine triphosphate means that it is made up of both adenine and ribose sugar. Together they are called adenosine. Tri is a prefix meaning 3. So tri is 3, is the number 3. Why the number 3? Because it contains 3 phosphate molecules. So this tri is supposed to mean 3 phosphate molecules. So triphosphate, adenosine, and 3 phosphates, ATP. So what does ATP do, and why is this structure very special to the body? Why does it use it for energy? So ATP in itself is not energy. ATP in itself does not create energy. ATP in itself is a molecule that you can load with energy and unload with energy. So you either add energy to it or take energy from it. So it's like an energy transporter. In a place where energy is made in the body, ATP goes there and loads energy from whichever source. It loads the energy, and it goes to a place where this energy is needed, and it unloads this energy. So it's like a bus. I like to call it a bus. It loads passengers, which is energy, and when it reaches its destination, it unloads and returns back to its empty state. So ATP is an energy transporter. It is not energy in itself. And when we look at the structure, where is energy transported? What enables it to do this job? What enables it is this phosphate bond, this last phosphate bond right here. So this phosphate bond is energy, is full of energy. So when you break it down, this bond, and you leave the molecule with only 2 phosphates, and you set this phosphate free, the third phosphate, you set it free, what happens is energy is released. It's like an exothermic reaction in chemistry. When you break down something, energy is released. So this bond contains energy. This is what carries all the energy. When you want to make this bond, when this molecule is in an area where energy is supposed to be made, it's supposed to be created. For example, a chloroplast in photosynthesis. This is where energy is made from light. So ATP goes to the chloroplast, and you will form ATP from ADP. So ADP is adenosine diphosphate. And it's basically the same thing, but instead of a tri, I have a di. And this di means 2. Di means 2, tri means 3. So adenosine diphosphate, or ADP, is the same molecule but without this phosphate. So in a place like the chloroplast, I will have a lot of adenosine diphosphate, ADPs. And because I have a lot of energy from photosynthesis, I want to store this energy. I want to store it in a molecule which is going to carry it to the place where I need it, where I need to use it. So in the chloroplast, my ADP, my adenosine diphosphate is going to be, and a phosphate group is going to be added to it. So you have adenosine diphosphate just like this. 2 phosphates, a ribose and adenine. You add to them a phosphate group, and for this to add a phosphate group, to create the phosphate bond, you will need energy. So this is the energy that I want my ATP to carry. So I give it in the form of making this phosphate bond. And after this ADP and phosphate have joined together, I have a molecule with 3 phosphate groups called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. And this molecule has all of the energy that I put in stored inside of it, in that phosphate bond which I created. So this phosphate bond contains all of the energy that I put in, this energy. And an enzyme called ATP synthase is what facilitates this process. So this enzyme is what adds a phosphate group to ADP to make ATP. All right, so ATP synthase requires energy in order to make ATP. And now, when I make this inside the chloroplast, it is free to go. I release my ATP and it's free to go to somewhere where they need energy, where energy is needed. And this ATP goes and breaks down this phosphate bond to form ADP again. So in a place, for example, like the roots in a plant, roots require energy in order to suck in the water from the ground or from the soil. So roots will require a lot of energy. They don't make energy, they require energy. So in roots, ATP, which came from the chloroplast in a leaf, reaches the root, and in the roots I use water to break down this ATP, break down this phosphate bond which we talked about earlier. And when this phosphate bond is broken, I will get a lot of energy released out. So this energy I can use in whatever I want in the root. So if the root needs active transport, it can use this energy to active transport material into the root. So energy here is released, and another enzyme facilitates this process, the breakdown of ATP into ADP and phosphate, which is called ATP hydrolase. It facilitates the hydrolysis, addition of water, and breaking down the phosphate bond is called hydrolysis. So it facilitates the hydrolysis of ATP into ADP and a free phosphate group. So I came back to where I started, ADP and a phosphate group. And now this ADP and phosphate group returns back to the chloroplast and does the same thing. So this is what I'm talking about. It's like a bus. It goes to the chloroplast, takes energy, and brings them down to the root, releases the energy, and then goes back again and again in a cycle that does not stop. So it's an energy carrier, an energy transporter. ATP, the one with the 3 phosphates, is full of energy, a full bus. And ADP, the one with 2 phosphates, is an empty molecule, no energy, an empty bus. All right. One last thing I need to emphasize upon is that this process, the process of making ATP from ADP and phosphate, is called phosphorylation, because we're adding a phosphate group to ADP. So it's called phosphorylation. This is the term I want you guys to use in your exam. This is the keyword that you use when you talk about ATP synthase converting ADP and phosphate into ATP. All right, now we know the meaning of the term ATP and ADP. What about molecules like NADP and NAD and NADPH and NADH? So maybe you've heard about these molecules, and they are also very important in respiration and in photosynthesis. So these are different molecules. They are called coenzymes. So a coenzyme is not an enzyme in itself. It is a helper of an enzyme. It's not an enzyme, it's a coenzyme. So coenzyme means helping an enzyme, a molecule that helps an enzyme out. How does it help an enzyme? How does this happen? So NADP is a molecule that can be easily reduced. So it can accept a hydrogen atom or hydrogen ion. So all coenzymes are easy to change into different things. So they're easy to accept molecules or release molecules. For example, let's talk about NADP for a bit. NADP is a coenzyme present in plants. So you will see this term a lot in photosynthesis, NADP. And you can remember this because it has an extra P here. P, you can think of it as P means plants. So NADP is found in plants. NAD without the P is found in animals. And they both do the same thing, NAD and NADP. So let's talk about NADP for now. NADP is a coenzyme that can be easily reduced. So reduced, what I mean by reduced is a hydrogen ion can be easily added to this molecule so that it becomes NADPH or reduced NADP because it accepted a hydrogen ion. And this reduced NADP or NADPH can go to different places, just like ATP. It can go to different places and release this hydrogen ion there. And when it releases this hydrogen ion, it helps a reaction happen. It releases energy. All right. So energy can be released from the release of hydrogen from NADPH, also called as oxidation. So oxidation and reduction is what happens with these molecules, these coenzymes, NADPH, NAD, FAD. So these three molecules act as coenzymes that can be reduced and oxidized. So oxidized is when you lose a hydrogen, reduced is when you gain a hydrogen. All right? So these are the molecules of NADP. We don't need to go into their structure like we did with ATP because this will complicate things and this is not really required in the specification of A-level biology. We just need to know that this is a coenzyme that gets reduced when hydrogen is added to it and gets oxidized when hydrogen is released from it. And it does exactly like ATP, it cycles from a state of reduction to a state of oxidation. Losing hydrogen, gaining hydrogen, losing hydrogen, gaining hydrogen. And as it does that, it releases energy and gains energy. Right? So these are also molecules that help in the transport of energy from one place to another. These are the keywords: ATP synthase, ATP hydrolase. You need to know them very well. And you need to know the keywords phosphorylation and hydrolysis for your exams. And have an idea. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you in another lesson.